Good afternoon. Scott Lange here with Visionary Philanthropic Consulting. We're off to a bit of a slow start because, candidly, they're doing some construction on my condominium, which is a good thing in that we're going to be protected from the outside elements. They're repairing the stucco, they're repairing the lanais, they're replacing lintels over several windows. If you check my LinkedIn page out a while ago, you'd see a picture of what my office looked like. It's not much better right now. This morning, they were using pneumatic hammers to bring up the tile on the lanai adjacent to mine, and it was just annoying. So I asked if they would stop for an hour. Hopefully, we've got that time together this afternoon, and we'll do just that. I'm going to begin by sharing my screen and bring you into today's subject, which is going to be major gift solicitation. This happens to be a favorite of mine because it's where I kind of got my stars and bars early on in the process when I was a director of development at Roanoke College in Salem, Virginia. So if you can see the screen, I'm going to start by sharing you a bit what I want to cover. The first is the philanthropic landscape, reality of campaigns and the 80-20 rule, the importance of stating a case, and then actually getting into the elements of prospect management, um, the steps involved, the differences between different types of meetings, how to create a caseload, and then the kind of reports that you're going to want to create. Hopefully, we'll have time at the end for some Q&A, and I look forward to that. I think many of you know me already. I've been around for what seems like an awful long period of time. I was one of those people who went out of college with a degree in political science, which made me ultimately qualified for graduate school. My dad said, "How are we going to pay for that?" And I got background noise here. I apologize tremendously. Um, got into fundraising and have stuck with it ever since. The bottom line to our philanthropic landscape is that according to Giving USA, donations are up. We've had 2 years now where cash donations have increased over the year before. This year, last year reported, we also had an increase in the value of those dollars in terms of inflation adjusted dollars. However, the contrary side of the picture is that according to the Fundraising Effectiveness Project, the number of donors is down. And candidly, it's been going down for the last 9 years. It's problematic because if you were to extend both lines out in the future, you could see a place in which one person is giving away all the money. And obviously, we don't want that to happen. We need multiple people giving. And in fact, those of us on the generosity subcommittee of Giving Institute are focused on doing our best to try to increase the number of donors in the country significantly over the course of the next 10 years. Now, while the number of donors is declining overall, what's interesting to note, according to the FEP data, is that at the $5,000 level and the $50,000 level, the actual number of donations or donors increased last year. So that's good news where you look at the -8, -4, -1% delta in the small and mid-sized lunch kits. So again, it makes sense to focus on this element, i.e. major gifts, which in our case, we typically translate as being any gift of $100,000 or more. Now, in theory, you understand the 80-20 rule. 80% of your business comes from 20% of your customers. Or in philanthropy, 80% of the donations come from 20% of the donors. And I've got a spam call coming through, which we've just silenced. However, in reality, when we start looking at campaigns, even in certain annual giving situations, we discover that 90% of the campaign gifts come from 10% of the donors. This is a classic gift chart for a $50 million campaign. And whenever we design these, we do it with the understanding that we want to raise more than the target. So we're going to build a campaign gift chart for 55 million, not just 50. And if you look at this, you can see that at the $1 million gift level and up, you've got 45% of the dollars coming from just 14 donors. When you get that down to the $250,000 level, 75% of the money is coming from that group, 85% coming from gifts of 100,000 or more. So this just reinforces what we would describe it. In reality, this is a client. 92% of the money came from 7.6% of the donors. And, it's since we're an evidence-based company, this is the kind of statistic that we use to formulate all of our tactics and strategies going forward. So the BFO, blinding flash of the obvious, let's spend 90% of our time with 10% of our donors. Those people who can really make an impact and make our programs fly and excel. So I want to make a distinction here, because when we talk about gifts of $100,000 or more, we're really talking about people who are making an investment in you, in your organization. So if you want to distinguish between fundraising on one hand and philanthropy on the other, fundraising is about asking, while philanthropy is about giving, or more importantly, about investing. Fundraising is about how much money you got to give. It's about assets. Philanthropy, on the other hand, is about values. Do I believe in what you're doing? Are we resonating? We have the same mission and vision for our future. Fundraising is transactional. Last year, Susie, you gave us $50. Would you consider a gift of $100 this year? Kind of like supersizing your order at the Burger King or McDonald's counter and getting the large fries instead of the regular things. Whereas philanthropy is about relationships, developing deep, meaningful relationships with people. Fundraising classically supports annual operations, whereas philanthropy and investment is going to support some capital project or an endowment that will give something some permanence going forward. I apologize for the noise in the background. I'd asked that this stopped, and apparently my weight is about as much as a grain of sand. Now, a long time ago, Jerry Panis, for whom I worked one period of time, did a study of the nation's largest donors. And he asked the question, why did you give? And I'm just pleased to hear that you can't hear through the microphone what I'm hearing here. Thank you very much for that. And I think in the back of everyone's mind at the time, there was this hypothesis that perhaps these wealthy people were doing something philanthropically to assuage themselves of guilt. They'd earn their money through some nefarious practice or bad, ethics. What turned out to happen was that when asked, why did you give? I believed in the mission, believed in the vision of the organization. Number two, they trusted the leadership. And this doesn't mean just the CEO. This is trusting in the board, your board chair, the board members, and that senior team. Trust is a specific key ingredient to earning this kind of donation. Thirdly, the organization they supported had a track record of success. In other words, they weren't going to throw good money after bad. And then lastly, imagine this, they were asked to give. They just wake up in the morning and decide they were going to invest, in a $250,000 digital studio for the local radio station because they listened to NPR on the way into work in the morning. No. Somebody they knew talked to them and asked them to give. So these four items have really framed our work in the philanthropic marketplace for the last several decades. And everything we do is predicated on ensuring that we can clearly articulate our mission, vision for the future, establish trust, build a longitudinal relationship with people, and demonstrate good work. And then lastly, we can help you with the asking plan. Classically, it takes 18 to 24 months for a major gift to be secured from start to finish. Like they don't know you to being able to earn the right to ask for a gift. Now, in healthcare, where I also work, Cleveland Clinic and other places, where you're dealing with medical issues that oftentimes are life-threatening and or life-shortening or life-saving, that collapses to about 9 to 12 months. It's not as extensive a period. And where it takes 7 to 8 contacts per prospect, meaningful one-on-one, two-way communication. In healthcare, that translates to about 5 or 6. And usually you need at least 3 or 4 prospects for everyone who agrees to make that kind of an investment. And often what we discover is we get about 75% of what we ask for. Sometimes we're surprised when people will give more than what we requested. What could you do with X? But in this case, statistically, this is what we've been seeing. Now, because of the breakdown of the word philanthropy, philos, anthropos, philos meaning love, anthropos, humankind, that's love to me is an emotion. And so I've defined philanthropy as tangible evidence of an emotional event. Something happened that touched the heart of the individual with whom you're speaking that makes them want to do something that otherwise would be irrational. Why would I give money away that I've worked hard to secure over the course of my lifetime to some nonprofit organization? As one of my former board members, David Morgenthaler at the Cleveland Clinic, said to me, he said, Scott, if I give you $100,000, $250,000, several things are not going to happen. I don't have a new Jaguar. I don't have a new condo. My wife is not wearing a designer dress. So how you treat me is like really important. Message received. Message received. So I want us to realize how important it is to state the case. In order for a case to be effective, it's got to answer the question, why are we doing it? A case statement is not about, what we're going to do, how much it's going to take. It's not about building sustainability for our organization. It's why. Why are we doing what we do? What role does the world need us to play? What's the big societal problem that only we can answer and provide the solution to? And what is it possible for us to become? If we're restrained right now because of our finances, if we had finances plus X, how much more could we improve the quality of life and human condition in which we find ourselves? And if you got a strategic plan that's outlining a trajectory of the future, what part of that vision is impossible because you don't have the resources? And those resources are things that philanthropy can provide, the gap that donors can bring in. What we've been discovering over the course of the last 10 years, more and more, is that people are tying in to this concept of, I acknowledge what you're doing, it's good. What's your aspiration for the future? Get me excited about something that's, a moonshot that could really propel us from one point to another. So the key elements of the case are for you to define what's the problem. And then how do we specifically resolve it? What's unique about our work? What do we do that's different from anybody else? What's the impact? And I'll tell you, when it comes to stewardship reports, Impact is what everybody's looking for. Not only what did you do with my money, but how did it affect those that you're dealing with? And then lastly, what distinguishes us from others? Why would I give to your museum more than any other museum? Why would I give to your private high school more than any other private high school? Why would I invest in the symphony more than another symphony? We've got to figure that out. So I refer to this as the philanthropic algorithm. Society exists in products, and donors have needs and interests. And then we, the nonprofit, have an ability to resolve those problems and provide opportunities for a philanthropist to satisfy their interests with an investment. When I started in this business, everybody talked about a need statement. We need a needs statement. What are the needs for the capital campaign? Well, we, the nonprofit, don't have needs. Our donors have needs, and we can satisfy those needs predicated on things we can do on our site with more resources, more people, et cetera, that can address that larger societal mission. And that's really what I want you to take advantage of. Now, you've all heard about the solicitation cycle, but I think it's good to reinforce it. It begins with identifying people, researching them, creating a plan, how best to approach them. You don't just send an email off to somebody asking for $250,000. Although my colleague, Jason Blumenthal, can tell you of circumstances where that, in fact, is exactly what's happening with some of his ultra high net worth people. Totally random, totally out of the blue. Hey, you got money, you deserve it, send it to us. Don't even need to be cultivated, don't even necessarily have a visit. Then, once you put your plan in place, you begin an engagement process, a cultivation process that leads to the point of solicitation. When you earn the right to ask for a gift and you secure the gift, then begins the process of stewardship. With stewardship, at some point in time comes an opportunity for renewal. Another gift, a second payment. Now, looking at the fundraising effectiveness project data, would say that we as a profession have been horribly horrible at stewardship. If we were doing a better job of thanking people, engaging people, reminding people the value of their gifts, I think we wouldn't have this drop off that we've been having. And classically, as I noted earlier, this process, discovery, education, cultivation, engagement, solicitation, takes time. And note that I put in here a differentiation between cultivate and engage. Cultivating is part of the process of doing things that get them to the point where they want to be involved. And when they're engaged, they'll do things like host an event for you, serve as a docent, help with your renovation project, become one of your volunteers of Habitat for Humanity, hanging drywall or putting in windows, etc. So when we get into the art of solicitation, I want to distinguish between two things, a move and an action. In my lexicon, a move is when someone changes in their solicitation status, i.e., they move from being a prospect to being a qualified prospect. They move from being in cultivation to being ready to be solicited. It's a change in status. Something is significantly happening that draws that individual, corporation, or foundation closer to us. An activity, an action is the thing. We're looking at the email, the text message, the phone call, the video call, the meeting, the event. Those are things that we put in play to bring that person along. So hopefully we create a pipeline. Hopefully, ideally, your prospect pool is evenly distributed. You've got people in discovery, you've got people in cultivation, you've got folks that are going to be ready to be solicited, and you've got some people that have given to you before that you need to steward. We'll get into portfolio balancing a little later, but what we want to do is continually introduce new prospects into the pipeline. A friend of mine, former, I guess is the immediate past chair of the Giving Institute, Josh Bergholtz, said that don't confuse a prospect pool with the reservoir. It's not. It's a stream. And we want to move people along that river and get them to the next level. This is a diagram I did to share with the board of one of my clients, because I wanted them to understand that fundraising is in fact a blend of art and science, and there is a process. And we start with identification, we do the screening, we determine whether or not they meet our requirements, we put them in a qualification process. Again, we discern whether or not they're qualified as a major prospect. We assign them to a prospect, to a gift manager's portfolio. We get in the cultivation process. We determine whether or not they're continuing to be interested and have money, and then we move them forward. If at any point along the time they lose interest and we discover they don't have the kind of money we're talking about, they drop into our annual giving program. And then when we're successful at the end of the pipeline, they move into stewardship. And we have a cultivated stewardship plan for those people. Now, at the macro level, whenever we do screening, what I like to suggest is that we have basically 3 levels. You're going to find people who have an ability to give, but it's less than $1,000 even. Then those people would automatically flow into your direct acquisition or annual giving program, your annual fund, or what we prefer to refer to now as the recurring gifts program. We don't want to just solicit people annually. We want to do it on a recurring basis. If they've got the capacity to give more than $250, we flip those people to a phone center. And if it's less than that, it's email, direct acquisition, etc. If they have a capacity to give north of 1,000, but less than 25, by definition, we're going to put them into the leadership gift category. Those are people who could consider a donation of 1,000 to 2,000 or more per year for the next 5 years, and they can be solicited by one of our gift officers. North of that, and it depends on the organization, for some small nonprofits, $50,000 qualifies as a major gift. In others, it's 100,000. But when they go into the major gift process, there's a pre-call letter, there's a telephone call to secure the appointment, to have the discovery visit, and then predicated on that, we develop a strategy for ongoing relationship. And this process I want to lay out is one that requires A, discipline, B, tactics, and C, strategy. Because while the methodology may be fluid or similar for everyone, what you're going to find is the elements that go into that pre-call letter, the script that you develop for the phone call, will vary person by person, predicated on their philanthropic history, their relationship with your organization, the types of things in which they're interested, and what you are going to ask them to do in that first meeting. Once you get them to agree to that appointment, that first meeting, then you come and sit down and prep for that meeting. And I want to absolve or arm you with the tools to meet with any member of your board or volunteer who thinks it's just about getting in the car and going asking people. Here we've got a situation where there's a methodology to all this. So when you get that first meeting, and I apologize if the background noise, again, they've stopped right now. Hopefully they'll stop for a while longer. But the purpose of a discovery visit, the very first interaction between you and another individual, and this could be the CEO of a corporation, it could be the program officer or the executive director of a foundation. You want to discover 2 things. 1, do they have the money to give? And 2, do they have an interest in your organization? If the answer to either one of those questions is no, they're no longer a prospect, and you move them into your annual giving operation. They don't stay in your major gift portfolio. For those who qualify, then you will carry on. And what you want at the close of this discovery meeting is an agreement to meet again. But I want to reiterate, discovery call, first interaction, you get acknowledgement of whether or not they're interested in you, your organization. And then secondly, if they've got major gift capacity. They might have demonstrated by a gift to another organization, or maybe your research shows that they've got the dollars and can invest it. Whether they will invest it is a different story. That comes later in the game. So when you prepare for this first meeting, again, major gift conversation, you want to ask questions. One of the best things that was suggested to me by my former boss, Jack Hills at Roanoke College, was, Scott, I think you ought to take an active listening class. That was a subtle way of saying I talked too much and needed to listen, not just listen, but hear and understand what people were saying. And so I would advise you to do the same. Start asking questions. What do you know about what's going on in our organization? How do you feel about it? Have you had a chance to meet our new CEO? Have you been on campus anytime in the last year, 5 years, 10 years? What are your impressions? You know, if they graduated from your school or college, what was most important to you? What had the greatest impact on your life? How did this experience prepare you for your professional career and the family you have today? You know, if you're working with another nonprofit organization, a food bank, a museum, whatever, how did you first get involved? How did you first hear of this? And if this is someone who was either a patient or a family member of the patient at your hospital, the question could be, what kind of care did you receive? What was your impression? How did you interact with the nurse staff, with your doctors, etc.? Ask questions and then remember what they said and embroider those into your plans. Now, we recommend to clients that you have to reinforce the fact that this is a marathon, not a sprint. You need a longitudinal, long-term engagement plan. So I'd like to summarize who the person is, their name, their contact information, what their largest gift was, what their rating is, what their background is with the organization. And then I want you to create a long-term objective. Eventually, we'd like Sally to be on our board. Short-term objective, it'd be great if she'd be willing to participate in our feasibility study. Or, I'd like to get her to come to an opening night of our dress rehearsal for the XYZ opera. And then who on the staff is going to be assigned as the prospect manager, which volunteer, which board member has the relationship that can actually get you in to see Sally, and then what do we need to do? Specifically, by whom and when, the next 4 to 5 steps. So it should take you a couple of months to get these things accomplished. And then once done, you add another one to the end. But this introduces the discipline to creating something that's going to be a curated conversation over time. So you've had the discovery visit. You've determined that Stephen over here has money, just never given any to us. So what we need to do is we need to start cultivating it. And in this case, what we need to do in a cultivation contact is make sure we get a shared understanding of the vision. What I want to be able to present to Stephen what we intend to do over the course of the next 5 or 10 weeks. And get his agreement or confirmation on our case for support rationale. And then I need to determine whether or not any trust has been established. If it's a relatively new relationship, it could be zero, in which case I need to fabricate opportunities for Stephen, my prospect, to meet the CEO, to meet with our program officer, the dean maybe, to meet with you know, a member of the board. Maybe it's the board chair even, or the vice chair, but need to get them engaged to build those relationships of trust that are lasting, and then ask enough questions to understand the motivation of the donor, right? I need to draw out what's important to you. Scott, how do you want to be remembered? You know, nobody wants to be remembered for watching 3 hours a day of television, right? No, it's about your kids, it's about the quality of your life, the character, or what's the old adage, at the epitaph. It's not when you were born and when you die, it's the dash in between. That dash has to be meaningful. And I love this. When I was brought in to do some training at the University of Denver, the vice president said, Scott, I need you to help my gift officers understand that there's a difference between doing lunch and getting something done. We had a situation with one client where they were rewarded for the number of contacts they made. So when we came in and did a portfolio analysis and actually counted over the course of the last 24 months, the number of contacts, visits with people, and the number of emails, text messages, phone calls, that kind of thing, contacts, visits, they met every visit goal. The problem was they were meeting with the same person over and over again. Sally would go to lunch with me. I'm calling Sally because I need a visit, right? It wasn't a formidable approach to trying to get the people involved in what we're doing. So before each meeting, what you need to do is sit down and identify what it is you hope to accomplish. What do you know about the prospect? Where can you tie in? What are the connections? What do you need to discover? One of the best prospect researchers I ever knew, oh, Dee Dee, she was wonderful at Manhattan College. She would produce a profile out of the system and identify all the areas that were blank and go to the vice president and say, Larry, you know that Charlie here has 2 children. Could you find out their names? Let's put them in the system. Yeah. Hey, Charlie, how are your kids? You have 2 children, right? Hey, I got Samantha and Rebecca. Oh my gosh, they are wonderful, darling young women. They're doing well in school. And one of them is actually involved in graduate school. You come back and put that in. You also ask questions about, their business stuff and how that business and those priorities might dovetail with what your organization is doing. Therefore, then you just discover how do you present your case and come up with a sense of how the prospect might respond. And that could be positive, it could be negative, right? You could get some hairball response like, why on earth would you ever want to do that? And then what kind of information do you need to bring along? What collateral you need to have as lead behind information? And you may or may not present it, but you ought to have something that will give definition. The other piece you need to understand is anytime you show up in anyone's office or do a web conference like this one, a major donor is going to go through their own series of evaluations internally. And the first one is going to be, why are they here? Like, how did I get on their radar list? Why are you talking to me? So that needs to be answered up front. And if it's kind of oblique, hey, Sally, I want to thank you for the time today. Our board chair, Rebecca, thinks the world of me and believes that because of your shared interests and values, you'd have an interest in what we're doing. And we really appreciate the 30 minutes you're giving us this afternoon. You have to address the question, why are you there and what's the connection? Secondly, they want to know, why are you talking to me? Huh? So Agner Pitta, the president of Case Western Reserve University, used to go out to in Cleveland, make a trip out west, and he'd sit down in somebody's office and say, "Hey, listen, John, I want you to know I'm not here to ask you for $1 million today. Today, I'm just here to tell you why I think $1 million is a good thing." He blew me away. But his answer, when I followed up with him, is this: "Hey, this guy knows I didn't fly across the country just to have a cup of coffee." And in the back of his mind, he's waiting for the other shoe to drop. So if I tell him that solicitation is off the table, I just want to tell him what the university is doing, what's important, and how he might be interested in it. That's what we want to accomplish. Third question they're going to have is, what's the impact? What is this organization trying to do? What are you trying to accomplish? And then how much is it going to cost? And why is it important to do it now? Why can't this thing wait? Right? And so these are all the questions in the back of a donor's mind that you need to address up front in your process. And while you're in that room, you're going to ask a question, determine if they have interest. And if the answer is no, then you can ask another question, see if they have interest in that. If it's no, you're going to ask a third question. You're going to continue to drill down until you found something in which you have shared interest. And then once you've got that, you can start outlining what you want to achieve that requires philanthropic support. If the answers are all no, you're going to go back home and revise your strategy, right? Because we got to take a different tack with this particular individual. As you're working with a group of people, and understand, if someone can give you $100,000, they've got multiple millions at their disposal. It's not their first, last, and only 100,000. My assessment from Wealth Screening Tools is that typically a major gift evaluation is roughly around 7% of net worth. But that also stipulates that that major gift evaluation or calibration is for all things philanthropic. So they may be supporting their church, their synagogue, their undergraduate school, their graduate school, their kids' school, maybe the Humane Society or Habitat or something else nearby that's important to them. So what can you do that distinguishes you from others? Well, you remember the little things: a birthday, an anniversary, the children's names. Whether or not they're playing in a sports competition this coming weekend. The daughter plays lacrosse. You want to follow the college lacrosse team. Send them a note when something happens. "Hey, I understand you just opened up a new office or bought a new company." Whatever it is, write them a little note. More than just a little comment on LinkedIn, something tangible that's expressive. And then the other thing you want to do is forward little emails or articles when you see something in the paper that's might be interesting to them, just to let them know that you're thinking about them. And then invite them to scheduled activities. If you've got a performance coming up, the students are going to do a rendition of Gone with the Wind. Pick a topic, pick a play. Have them come to the dress rehearsal. Football games in universities are traditional cultivation activities in the boxes and elsewhere. But there are other things you can do as well. Get them on site and looking around, and reinforce the fact you've got to earn the right to ask for a gift. A contribution is just that. It's a gift. It's not an obligation. And so the person does not have to do anything. They don't owe you anything. You have to earn the right to ask. And they'll invest when they believe their dollars will be well used and where they trust you. And that trust, as I've said earlier, takes time to develop. But also, I have to warn you, it can be eroded in just a second. And then it's very difficult to earn that back. So how you treat people is important. So now, major gift solicitation. you're looking at your watch, you're saying, holy smoke, it's only been 40 minutes and now we're just now talking about it. But the solicitation visit is where you're going to ask for the significant gift. You're going to bring with you a written, personalized proposal. It's going to incur at the end of the engagement process. You'll get to a point where you know instinctively that you've developed this to the point where you've earned the right to ask. In fact, since I worked in Missouri for a while, the show me state, I used to ask this question: George, would you be willing to have me come back in 2 weeks with a proposal for your consideration? If the answer is yes, George is ready to be solicited. If the answer is no, he's not, and we need more time. So the proposal itself is going to describe the benefit to society, outline the impact and outcomes, but more important, I want to be able to verbally articulate this in the meeting as well. So when you're one-on-one, you make the connection, you reinforce the donor's motivations. George, I understand that you've got a passion for eradicating hunger. And the best way to do that here in our county is by supporting the food bank, because we provide the necessary nutrients to keep families alive and healthy. And when they're well fed, they're not stealing, they're not getting involved in criminal activities, they're able to get a good night's rest, they're able to go on and get a job. The impact of that one little delivery of food is exponential. So we're going to reinforce their motivations, what we can do to solve it, review the actual gift opportunity, reinforce the value of that investment for them on society and within the organization. As you know, of all the food banks in the area, we are the most efficient and effective. We engage the highest number of volunteers. We've got more people involved. We can deliver more food with less input than anyone else. There's no waste here. And we'd like your help in eradicating hunger in our area. So, George, I'd like you to consider a gift of $100,000. It is vital, vital that you say nothing after that request is made. Again, my friend Jason tells a story. I think you heard it when you listened to our mistakes webinar a couple months back. He was accompanying one of his clients to a meeting with the CEO and the vice president of an organization that had done a wonderful job of engaging, cultivating this particular donor. Went to a lovely location for lunch, sat there, and she was prepared in the back of her mind to give him $1 million. They asked her for 500,000. And no sooner did they ask, the retort was, well, if that's too much, 250 would be great. So in the car on the way back, the comment was, let me get this straight. I was ready to give them $1 million. They asked for 500,000, and then they immediately cut that down to 250. Okay, so get the check cut for $250,000, and then let's figure out where to give the balance of the money. Say nothing until the donor responds. They may say, I need to think about it. They may say, I need to talk to my spouse or my attorney or my accountant, or I need to get back to you. But don't say anything until they talk. Once you get into a stewardship meeting, after they've made the gift, you've got to demonstrate the appreciation for what they've done, thank them for their investment, present an impact report. Here's what we accomplished with your money. Produce an appropriate acknowledgement of memento. It could be a little thing. It could be a coffee mug. See, my son works for Ford Motor Company in their design office. He gives me these, swag. Um, could be a pen, something modest, just a little thank you. Offer them an opportunity to talk to your leadership. I'd like to get together with you together with our CEO. Um, Love to provide an opportunity for you to meet after the next board meeting at the board reception with other members of our volunteer team. Look for opportunities to advance the cause, and then ask for a referral. Is there anybody else that you know to whom you might be able to introduce us? That in alone could help turn around this declining donor trend that we've seen if people start nominating folks to you. Do a debrief after every meeting. What did we accomplish? What progress is made? What went well? What could have been improved? What needs to be done next? When's our next meeting? Has the status changed? And then get the report into the system. Tremendously important. I want to take just a few minutes here, talk about prospect management and caseload. Normally, major donors are not going to be available to you on Monday or Friday. Friday, they're getting ready for the weekend. Monday, they're going through their inbox and they're inundated with work. Recognizing we've got 52 weeks in a year. 4 of those are gone with vacation, holidays, sickness, etc. So you got 48 weeks available, and this could look like a typical calendar. Maybe you're doing 3 to 4 calls a week. You got to travel from one city to another on Wednesday, so you do lunch in one place Wednesday, you travel, spend the night, and then you got breakfast the next morning with somebody. Then you're going back, you take lunch, got to travel again to the office, and then get your reports in and start making emails and phones follow up for what you did before. So a typical visit requirement for a major gift officer is about 15 calls per month. I mean, these are one-on-one. This isn't just Joan attended a committee meeting and I was in the meeting room with her. This is one-on-one, meaningful two-way communication. Could be video, but most preferably in person. 15 of those, 180 a year. And then conversely, on the principal gift side, where you're dealing with gifts of $1 million or up, the caseload and requirement is a little more deliberate and a little bit reduced. At the start of a campaign, as I talked about earlier, oftentimes you got a number of people in your portfolio you don't know. Most of your time is going to spend in discovery. Mid-campaign, it should be nicely balanced. And at the end, hopefully, you've got a whole bunch of people in stewardship. But remember what Josh said, you want to continually bring people into the pipeline. So you're going to have people in discovery, you're going to have people in cultivation as well. Right now, the average case major gift assignments for 100 at the $100,000 level, about 100, maybe 125 per. Principal gifts 50, and then the leadership annual gift call, which is a little more run and gun. You're going to basically get a solicitation out every time you meet with somebody. There's not as much cultivation involved. Could be a larger portfolio, often 175, maybe as much as 200. Now, a buddy of mine, David Lively, who's now the VP up at Northwestern University, wrote a book after we did the case conference on major gifts together, and he called it the contrarian's view. In other words, he wasn't so much interested in having 100 names in someone's portfolio. He was interested in knowing of his staff, who are the 24, 25 people you're going to solicit this year. If you're going to put 2 proposals out a month, who are those 24 people? And then in addition to that, who are the 24 that you're going to solicit next year? So your whole portfolio may be no more than 50. And it's focused, curated conversations. I was talking with Dr. Ream at Cleveland State University recently, and she said this is the tactic that they're beginning to employ at CSU with their college-based gift officers. So this seems to be taking hold more and more. If you look at an allocation of time, discovery visit, that's one and done, right? You're either going to stay in the portfolio and move on to cultivation, or you're over. And we're assigning you to my colleague in annual giving. Cultivation visits, usually 2. So if somebody moves from discovery to cultivation, that's going to be 3. You have 3 solicitation visits, and then at least 1 stewardship visit. If you've got 25 in your portfolio that are in the stewardship category, you want to see each one annually. So that makes up your portfolio of 100 people, and just under 180 calls to do that. On a monthly basis, you want to report and track how many prospects you've got in the system entirely, how many were contacted, how many were done this month, what's our target, and what's our delta. And then where are they in the solicitation pipeline and category. And then track, how many prospects have been solicited and what's the dollar value of the proposal. We want to be able to track each one of those items as well. And then come up with a dashboard like this for each gift officer. How many visits, solicitations, closures are we supposed to get per month? How much money are we supposed to raise? How many solicitations are we to make? And then where does our portfolio sit in terms of the status? And are we moving people from that assessed to cultivation to solicitation category at the bottom? Again, my friend, who was the former dean of the business school, became the vice chancellor at the University of Denver, LaRue Boyd, said, "Scott, here's what I know. If the behaviors are right, the money will follow." And so I want to leave you with that and one other item, because as we stated last month, several schools and healthcare institutions are using Givsy's AI product and an actual development assistant. Ava is what they're calling her, the AI virtual assistant. And people are actually interacting with Ava, responding to emails, asking if they'd like some information, asking if they'd be willing to receive a proposal. And what they did was they assigned prospects that were qualified, but not assigned to anybody. They didn't have enough gift officers to hit this group of people, and they weren't necessarily in the top tier of proclivity or giving capacity. And it's having a positive impact. So with that, what I'd like to do is open up and see if there are any questions that you've got on the table in the minute or 2 remaining, because I'd like to help. You just put something in the chat. Okay, so good question. Do visits have to be in person? Man, oh man, we ran into this in COVID era. The answer is no. But they do have to be meaningful. So in other words, you could schedule a video conference, you could schedule a phone call. It has to be a meaningful 2-way conversation. Cassie King actually closed, I think it was a $5 million gift at Washington Hospital Center with an individual that she met for the first time at the ribbon cutting ceremony. Everything else had been done electronically or by phone with a former grateful patient. So it does not have to be in person. I'm old school, you can tell by the white hair. I prefer to do things one-on-one, but you can do more efficiently with the internet now than you could have 5 or 10 years ago. Question, will we be sharing this? And yes. How do I define meaningful for metric purposes? Oh boy, that's a good question. So a meaningful conversation is one that, I'll answer a question with maybe an alternative. It's not superficial. It's not we attended an event together and said hello. It's an actual curated conversation with the types of questions that I placed on the screen earlier to get a response from people and learn how to move the thing forward. Um, Depending on what you're trying to raise money for, I would suggest that there are circumstances in which a site visit may be the only way to do it, right? We brought people to the athletic facility at the University of Wisconsin La Crosse to show them why we needed to build a new stadium because the cement was literally falling from the ceiling. And until they walk around in a hard hat, they don't get it. Same thing happened with Parkland Hospital in Dallas. You know, we just couldn't renovate that building for the new modern technology that's needed in healthcare. It had to be torn down and a new one constructed across the street in this case, which is what happened. So there are instances in which I think a nothing will supplant a personal visit or interaction like that. Great question. How long does a donor stay in stewardship? And when do you move them back into cultivation for the next gift? Interestingly enough, we've been tracking gifts of $1 million or more since 2008. And I may be wrong on this, but I think in many instances, maybe just under half, 50%, that may be the largest gift that family's ever made. It's their ultimate donation to the organization which they believe. However, many others do give again. And it depends on the circumstances. I mean, I think if someone made a $1 million investment to endow a charity, it's not, they ought to continue to remain giving at the highest annual giving level. So maybe they continue to give $5,000 or $10,000 a year for a current operation. You may wait 2 or 3 years before the time is right to ask them for another $1 million. That's where the sensitivity comes in. And oftentimes, if they made that kind of investment, you're probably going to get them involved somehow, and they will learn of something that interests them and ask a leading question, like, what would it take to do the following? And then that provides a line of logic to follow up. On general principles, if it took somebody 4 years to pay off $1 million pledge, I would wait at least 2 before I even thought about something to present in year 3 that they might be interested in. But again, it totally depends. And you can also see somebody paid in cash of $1 million. You can talk to them about estate planning opportunities that don't involve a transaction now. They involve a transaction in the future. And it could be something easy like leaving you as a beneficiary in the IRA. Anything else? Well, I think we've hit the end of our hour. Again, if the background noise was annoying to you like it was to me, I apologize for that. It was an unintended consequence of where we are. We'll get this out to you and let you know that when I first started this enterprise, I had a prospect management system called Gifted Memory. We're now in the process of bringing that back in an online version. If you've got any interest in learning more about that, should be available for review sometime this fall, October, November. Let me know. We'll be happy to give you a demo of that. Once again, thank you so much. Have a great holiday weekend, and we'll see you next month. Take care. Bye-bye.